November 11th, 1918. The guns fall silent across Europe. Church bells ring in London. Men in uniform embrace in the streets. Britain has won the Great War. The Union Jack flies over the largest empire the world has ever seen. A quarter of the globe bows to the crown. To anyone watching the victory parades in Trafalgar Square, Britain appears invincible. The greatest military and economic power on earth. But that's what we've been told. That's the story in the history books. Here's the truth. Britain didn't win World War I. Britain survived it. And the cost of that survival was so catastrophic that it destroyed the empire from within. This isn't a story about battlefields. This is a story about balance sheets. Because while the politicians celebrated victory, the accountants were staring at a ledger that told a different story. Britain was bankrupt. The empire had committed financial suicide, and the weapon it used was gold. Let me take you back to 1914, before the war. Britain is the center of the universe. London is where the world's money lives. The pound sterling is the reserve currency of the planet. If you want to buy wheat in Argentina or rubber in Malaya, you pay in pounds. British banks finance railways in China and mines in South Africa. The city of London is not just a financial center. It is the financial center, the beating heart of global commerce. Walk through the streets of the city and you can feel the weight of empire. Marble columns, mahogany desks, vaults filled with gold bars stacked like bricks. Every transaction in every corner of the world flows through these institutions. Britain doesn't just control territory, it controls capital. And capital is power. The system that makes this possible is called the gold standard. It's simple, and it's beautiful. Every pound note is backed by a specific amount of gold sitting in the Bank of England. You can walk in with paper and walk out with metal. This creates trust. It creates stability. It creates an empire. But then comes August 1914. War breaks out. And war is expensive. Catastrophically expensive. Britain needs to pay for armies, for ships, for shells, for food. Millions of men must be fed and armed. The scale of spending is beyond anything anyone has imagined. In the first year alone, military expenditure exceeds the entire government budget from a decade earlier. Where does the money come from? At first, Britain spends its savings. It liquidates foreign investments. Railways in Argentina are sold. Mines in Africa are auctioned off. British-owned factories in America are handed over to pay for American steel and Canadian grain. It's like selling the furniture to pay the rent. And when the furniture runs out, Britain borrows. Massive loans from the United States. Bonds sold to its own citizens. The national debt explodes. In 1914, Britain owes 600 million pounds. By 1918, the number is 7 billion pounds. Think about that scale, a tenfold increase in 4 years. And here's the fatal detail. Much of this debt is owed to America, and it has to be repaid in dollars. Britain suspends the gold standard during the war. It has no choice. You cannot fight a modern industrial war and maintain a fixed currency. So the link between paper and gold is quietly severed. The printing presses run. Inflation doubles prices across the country. The pound, which had been worth $4.86 before the war, begins to fall. By 1919, it trades as low as $3.40. To the men who run Britain, this is a moral catastrophe. A weak currency means a weak nation. It means Britain has lost its place at the top of the hierarchy. It means New York might replace London. The psychological blow is unbearable. These are men who grew up in an empire where the sun never set, where British power was a fact of nature. They cannot accept that the world has changed. They cannot accept that America is now the creditor and Britain is the debtor. So they make a decision that will destroy millions of lives. They decide to turn back time. The plan is simple. Britain will return to the gold standard. And not just any gold standard. They will return at the pre-war exchange rate, $4.86 to the pound. They will pretend the war never happened. They will force the economy back into the shape it had in 1913. This is not a policy. This is a fantasy, because the world has changed. British industry is no longer competitive. During the war, while British factories made bullets, Japan and America stole Britain's export markets, coal from Poland, steel from America, textiles from India. The customers are gone, and Britain's machinery is outdated. The factories are worn out. The mines are exhausted. But the bankers and politicians refuse to see it. They believe that if they can just restore the currency, everything else will follow. They believe in the magic of gold. To force the pound back up to $4.86, Britain must engineer deflation. They must make money scarce. They must squeeze the economy until prices fall. The Bank of England raises interest rates. Credit becomes expensive. Businesses cannot borrow. The government slashes spending. Housing programs are cut. Social services are gutted. The goal is to make everything in Britain cheaper. Wages must fall. Prices must fall. And if people suffer, well, that's the cost of sound money. By the early 1920s, unemployment climbs past 1 million. In the coal towns of Wales and the shipyards of Scotland, men stand idle. Orders dry up because British goods are too expensive. A ton of British coal costs more than German coal purely because of the exchange rate. But the financial elite view this suffering as necessary. It is the bitter medicine, the price of restoring national honor. In 1924, Winston Churchill becomes Chancellor of the Exchequer. He knows nothing about economics. He later admits that when he looks at Treasury figures, the numbers swim before his eyes. But Churchill is a romantic. He loves empire. He loves history. He loves the grand gesture, and the bankers whisper in his ear. They tell him he can be the man who restores Britain's greatness, the man who puts the pound back on gold. Churchill hesitates. He is not stupid. He senses the danger. He writes private memos questioning whether finance should be prioritized over industry. He says he would rather see finance less proud and industry more content. To resolve his doubts, he hosts a dinner party. He invites the governor of the Bank of England and the senior Treasury officials. But he also invites John Maynard Keynes. Keynes is the most brilliant economist in Britain, and he is horrified by the plan. At the dinner, Keynes lays out the mathematics. He tells Churchill that the pre-war exchange rate is a fantasy. Based on production costs in Britain versus America, the pound is worth about 10% less than $4.86. If Churchill forces the pound back to that rate, he will artificially overvalue the currency by 10%. Every British exporter will be slapped with a 10% tax. Every foreign importer will get a 10% subsidy. And to make British goods competitive again, Employers will have to cut costs. The biggest cost is labor. Wages must fall. Keynes looks Churchill in the eye and says, "You are declaring war on the working class. You will force employers to slash wages. There will be strikes. There will be chaos. There will be blood." Churchill listens. He is troubled, but the weight of the establishment crushes him. The Bank of England, the Treasury, the Conservative Party. They all say Keynes is a radical, an eccentric, a man who doesn't understand the moral necessity of sound money. They appeal to Churchill's vanity. They tell him that if Britain doesn't return to gold, America will eclipse the empire forever. Churchill caves. On April 28, 1925, Churchill stands in the House of Commons. The chamber is packed. With his trademark rhetoric, he announces that Britain is returning to the gold standard at $4.86. He declares, "We are often told the gold standard will shackle us to the United States. I will tell you what it will shackle us to. It will shackle us to reality." The House erupts in applause. Members wave their papers. The Times calls it a masterpiece of statesmanship. The City of London celebrates. But outside Westminster, reality hits fast, and it hits hard. Within weeks, the price of British coal jumps in international markets. Foreign buyers in Italy and South America look at the new prices and turn away. They buy cheaper German coal instead. Polish coal. American coal. The British coal owners panic. They are already operating on razor-thin margins. The 10% price increase wipes out their profit. They are now losing money on every ton. They have one option: cut costs. Cut wages. On June 30, 1925, just 2 months after Churchill's speech, the coal owners announced they are terminating the National Wage Agreement. Wages will be cut by 13 to 25%. The working day will increase from 7 hours to 8 hours. The miners are outraged. They are already among the poorest workers in Britain. Their work is brutal, dangerous, deadly. Now they are being told to work longer for less. Also, bankers in London can enjoy a strong currency. The miners' union leader coins a slogan: "Not a penny off the pay, not a minute on the day." It becomes the battle cry of the British working class. Keynes's prediction has come true in less than 3 months. The strong pound is a tax on the miners of Durham to subsidize the wine importers of Kensington. It is a transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, from the north to the south, from labor to capital. The government realizes a massive strike is coming. They are not ready, so they buy time. They offer a temporary subsidy to keep wages up for 9 months. It is a band-aid on a bullet wound. During those 9 months, both sides prepare for war. The government organizes an emergency supply network. The unions form the Triple Alliance. Miners, transport workers, and railway men pledge to stand together. Churchill begins to realize what he has done. He has been misled. He thought the gold standard would bring stability. Instead, it is bringing revolution. But he cannot back down. The prestige of the empire is staked on the currency. To devalue now would be an admission of failure. The deadline arrives in May 1926. The mine owners refuse to back down. The miners refuse to accept the cuts. The owners lock them out. On May 3, 1926, the call goes out. The buses stop. The trains stop. The docks fall silent. The general strike has begun. It is the largest industrial action in British history. Over 1.7 million workers walk off the job. The country is paralyzed. It feels like revolution. But the government has prepared. They recruit volunteers from the middle class. University students drive buses. Stockbrokers unload ships. Retired officers run the trains. They see themselves as defenders of civilization against anarchy. Churchill takes charge of government propaganda. He treats the strike not as a labor dispute, but as an insurrection. He writes, "This is a conflict which can only end in the overthrow of parliamentary government or its decisive victory." The rhetoric works. The Trade Union Congress becomes terrified. On May 12th, after 9 days, they surrender. They call off the general strike without securing a single guarantee for the miners. It is a betrayal. The miners are abandoned. But they refuse to give up. They stay out for 6 more months. They watch their children grow thin. They sell their furniture. They burn their floorboards for heat. But you cannot strike against arithmetic. By November, starvation forces them back underground. They accept longer hours, lower wages. They have been crushed. The government breathes a sigh of relief. They believe they have won. Order is restored. The pound is safe at 4.86. They expect the economy to boom. But the boom never comes. From 1926 to 1929, Britain stagnates. In America, it is the roaring 20s. The stock market soars. Skyscrapers rise. Cars and radios flood the market. France and Belgium, who devalued their currencies after the war, see their industries recover. Britain sits in the corner. The pound is still overvalued. British goods are still too expensive. The wage cuts are not enough to compensate for the currency handicap. To keep the pound pegged at 4.86, the Bank of England must keep interest rates high. If rates fall, gold will flow to New York, so they keep their foot on the brake. At the exact moment British industry needs cheap credit to modernize, the gold standard chokes off investment. The old industries die slowly. Unemployment never falls below 1 million. In some northern towns, 70% of men are out of work. They stand on street corners, surplus people, sacrificed for a currency symbol. Then comes October 1929, the Wall Street crash. The Great Depression begins. American loans to Europe evaporate. Global trade collapses. British exports are decimated. Unemployment surges to 2.5 million by 1930. But the real crisis comes in 1931. A banking crisis sweeps across Europe. It starts in Austria. The Credit Anstalt Bank collapses. It spreads to Germany. Massive capital is frozen. London banks have lent heavily to Germany. Suddenly those assets are locked. The city of London is caught in a liquidity trap. They owe money to France and America, but cannot collect from Germany. Foreign investors realize the Bank of England does not have enough gold to cover its liabilities. The run begins. In July 1931, millions of pounds in gold are withdrawn every day, shipped to Paris, shipped to New York. The governor of the Bank of England has a nervous breakdown and flees to Canada. The Labour government is trapped. To stay on the gold standard, they must balance the budget. The bankers in New York and Paris send a clear message. We will lend you money to defend the pound, but only if you cut spending, specifically unemployment benefits. It is a cruel ultimatum. To save the currency, the government must cut the lifeline keeping millions alive. The cabinet is paralyzed. Half the ministers refuse. The government collapses. In August 1931, a national government forms. Its sole purpose is to save the gold standard. They do exactly what the bankers demand. They raise taxes. They slash unemployment benefits by 10%. They cut public sector wages. Teachers, police officers, sailors. They inflict misery on the entire nation to defend $4.86. They believe if the pound falls, civilization will collapse. They warn of hyperinflation. They terrify the public. But they push too hard. On September 15, 1931, the Atlantic Fleet is anchored at Invergordon in Scotland. When sailors hear their pay is being cut, they mutiny. It is a polite British mutiny, no violence. They simply refuse to work. They gather on decks and sing songs. But the news that the Royal Navy has mutinied sends shockwaves through global markets. If Britain cannot control its own navy, how can it control its currency? The run on the pound turns into a stampede. In 3 days, the Bank of England loses nearly all its remaining reserves. On Saturday, September 19th, the directors meet in emergency session. They look at the empty vaults. They look at the telegrams from New York refusing loans. They realize the game is up. They have starved the miners. They have crushed industry. They have slashed benefits. They have provoked a naval mutiny, all to defend the gold standard. And they have failed. On Sunday, September 20th, 1931, the government makes its decision. Britain suspends the gold standard. The pound is no longer redeemable for gold. It floats. The elite brace for catastrophe, hyperinflation, riots, the end of London as a financial center. But on Monday morning, the sky does not fall. The pound drops to $3.40, its 1919 level. Life goes on. Milk is delivered. Buses run. The economy begins to breathe. A cheaper pound boosts exports. Interest rates fall. Credit flows. Housing expands. New industries rise. Leaving gold is not disaster. It is recovery. The British people came to realize with a sickening clarity that the suffering of the last decade had been for nothing. The unemployment, the strikes, the hunger, all unnecessary. A self-inflicted wound caused by leaders who valued prestige over reality. The Golden Straitjacket revealed a hard truth. A currency is meant to serve the economy, not dominate it. When a nation sacrifices prosperity to defend a symbol, it destroys the very strength it hopes to project. Britain remained a great power for a little while longer, but the financial spine of the empire was broken. A decade of stagnation weakened industry just as a new threat rose in Germany. When Britain confronted Hitler in 1939, it did so as a diminished power. Its factories were smaller. Its treasury was no longer deep. To fight, Britain had to borrow again, this time on America's terms. The bargain was brutal. Cash and carry, lend-lease. In exchange for ships, oil, and survival, Britain surrendered gold, assets, and bases. By 1945, the transfer was complete. The empire was not merely bankrupt, it was liquidated. The tragedy of the Golden Straitjacket was not malice, but confusion. Leaders mistook symbols for strength. They sacrificed the real economy to save the financial one, and lost both. An economy exists to serve society. When that truth is forgotten, empires fall.